What's up, guys? So today I'm going to be putting the energy suspension body cab mount bushings in on my Tacoma. I noticed my front passenger front radiator support bushing, which is one of these we'll replace, was worn out and showing a lot of play, and I went and looked online and found the whole kit to replace all of them. So my cab jumps around a lot, wiggles around a lot. You can see it in the mirror whenever we're off-roading, when you compare it to the bed and the cap and everything like that. So this should stiffen some things up and maybe transmit a little more vibrations, but overall I think it's gonna definitely be an improvement here. So I'll get down here and show you guys the worn out bushing. So as you can see, this is my passenger front radiator support bushing. It's just totally shot, got some bushing protrusion right here. It's all dry rotted and cracked up and just no longer providing the support it needs. I'm at 160 something thousand miles, so it's with a lot of off-road use, so it's definitely seen some abuse, and it's time to be replaced. Alright guys, so for the sake of the length of the video, I'm only going to show you how to do one side. So first we're going to start off with the passenger front, and then we'll move back. And obviously it's going to be the exact same thing, but on the opposite side. So first thing you want to do, break the nut loose on the bottom of the bolt here. Of course, now our issue is there's actually a bolt head on the top here. I can feel with my hand, and so the whole unit is spinning because this is a nylock. So what we're going to do is I'm going to get a wrench up here to hold that still so I can loosen that up. Alright, I got my wrench on the top side here, which is holding the top of this bolt still, so I can loosen this up without it rotating on me. I would normally use an air tool right now, but my bumper is in the way, so kind of stuck with a wrench, but I figure most of you guys will be using a wrench anyways, so it might be good to see it like this. Alright. Alright, so we got that off. It's a washer and a nut. I'm going to set that off to the side. You'll see your bolt pulls right out the top here. And that's your long body mount bolt with also a washer up top. Alright, so next we're going to remove the old bushing. The bottom piece, mine just pulls right out. You can see how rusty and corroded this sleeve was. We'll put that off to the side. The top one we may have to pry up on the body slightly. See if I can get out of your way here. And then that pulls out. In the body now we just have a big gap, and I'll show you guys a little closer up of how destroyed the bushing is here, if I can get the focus. Alright, so now that that's out, we can prepare to put the new one in. Alright, so as you see here, this is the old factory body mount bushing that I just pulled out. Just completely worn out. A lot of hard miles on this one. And so originally the body sandwiched in between there, and that was frame, and then the bolt came down on top there. Alright, and then you can see here is the energy suspension replacement. This will go down from the top, this will come up from the bottom and sandwich the body in between here. Then you'll have your washer, and then your nut, and then your other washer with your bolt down through the top, and it's just as simple as that. So we'll get to installing that next. Alright, so next I took the metal sleeve out, make it a little easier to slide it in there, because we're gonna have to pry up on the body here to be able to gap be big enough for this. So hopefully I'm not in your way here, but I'm gonna put this in now. As you can see, pried up on the body here, stuff the bushing in there, put the washer on top. Next step, we're gonna put this metal sleeve up in there where it should be. So then that'll just stick through the bottom like that. And let's see. We'll put our bottom bushing on there. It'll just slide onto the sleeve and should stay just like that. Cleaned up the bolt a little bit. There's a little bit of rust and corrosion on there, so clean that up. Clean the threads up on the wire wheel. Now we're going to slide our bolt down from the top of the body down through all the bushings, and then it's going to protrude out through here. Next up is going to be our washer. That's going to slide up, and then it's not a knot lock like I stated earlier. It's actually a pinch nut, so this won't need Loctite or anything like that. We're just going to be able to torque this to spec, and it's not going to come loose on you. So then you just get that threaded up on there. Alright, and then next I'm going to look up the spec if there is one on this, where there should be. And then we're going to get that torqued to spec, and then we can move on further down the truck. Alright, so online I found the other cab mounts, the through bolt torqued to 34 foot-pounds. This one should be fine. They didn't specify anything different for this, so 34 foot-pounds should be appropriate. I have a wrench on the top, of course, to hold it still. I've run it down until it felt like it was starting to get tight. It's got to compress the bushing some until this washer seats against that sleeve in there. And then you just go until you get your click. There you go. So that's 34 foot-pounds. And that's torqued to spec. Doesn't need to be any tighter than that. Like I said, it's a pinch nut anyways, so that'll be just fine. All right, and then we'll move on to the back. Before we get started on these rear mounts over here, there's a few very important things you got to disconnect. Otherwise, you run risk of breaking, damaging wires, and having trouble codes when you're done with your job here. So there's ABS connector that sits right in here and plugs into there, and that's actually attached to the body, to the frame down there, and then it goes from the frame to the body. And there's little to no slack. So when you start lifting up the body off the frame to get your mounts out or your mounts in, it's going to stretch that wire and run a really high risk of breaking it or just damaging it. So it's good to disconnect that. And then I also didn't disconnect this connector, but I took it off its mount right here. It just sits right there on the same bracket as the ABS sensor. Took it off there, so that's nice and free. And then Toyota is actually smart. I'm sure most manufacturers do this, but the brake line, I was concerned about that as well, is in this bracket right here. So I kind of took it out of that bracket. Let me raise the light. Kind of took it out of that bracket, but if you look, they made it like a coil spring right there, which is pretty convenient. So as you're lifting up the body, the spring will actually, I say spring, it's spring-like, will actually decompress, and it'll allow it to have slack. But I just took this out of there just to be safe. I'd rather not, mess up a brake line or anything. And for this side, you will see you have your vents right here. They just kind of plug onto this little things. You just pop those right out. And then also you have another ABS connector. As you can see, it goes right down to the frame right there, and then right up to the body right here. And you want to just make sure that's disconnected and out of its bracket, so you're not stretching those wires and breaking those. And then I think other than that, you're good to go. Next up, after you've disconnected everything on the engine bay there, you're going to need access to the top of these cab mount bolts. So there's some interior panels you got to pull. They just pop right off. It's no big deal. This one's just a little stubborn. Alright, so that pops off. You're going to stick that off to the side. Next, you're going to want to get this panel off. It's got this little knobby here. You just kind of unscrew that. Pull that out of the way. This panel pops right off. Might be a little stubborn, but alright. Then, pull your carpet out of the way. Get some light in here for you. All right, and then there's a plug in the floor. Pull that off, and that is access to the top of your bolt. So when you're changing your mounts out, you could pull the bolt out from the top and allow you to switch the mounts out. And here, I'll go on to the rear and show you how to get to that one. For access to the rear, fortunately for me, I made this platform which took my back seats out, which makes this part of the process a little easier. You're gonna have to fold your seats forward, remove the plastic, black plastic from the back here to gain access to the top of this bolt. All right, so then here, once you remove your black plastic and you get to this part, there's a plug. All right, and then there's the top of your bolt that you're gonna have to gain access to. So that one's nice and simple to get to once you get that back plastic out of the way. And we're gonna move on to doing the mounts now. All right, next up we're gonna do this, take this front nut off this cab mount. If you're like me and your truck's been in the dirt and mud, or it's got a little bit of age on it, some penetrating oil or PB blaster or something's gonna be your friend on this one. Obviously put a little there, and then you actually have 2 bolts that hold the top plate on up there, and you want to go ahead and spray them too. All right, now when you go to loosen this nut, this bolt is likely going to spin. They actually did a hex on the end there, and it's 9 millimeters. Here, I'll zoom in. I don't know if it's going to allow to see that, but anyways, this is 9 millimeter. This is a 17. I'm going to take the gun first and kind of break it loose. All right, so now the whole unit is just spinning. You can either put a wrench or a socket and ratchet up on the head up top, or you can hold this with a 17 millimeter wrench and then take a 9 millimeter socket and actually tighten this stud while you're holding this still, and it'll back this nut off. So that's what we're gonna do next. Change up the angle here a little bit. Hopefully it's gonna help you guys see what's going on. All right, so as I was saying, 17 millimeter wrench on the nut, and then 9 millimeter is this stud, and you want it on forward or tighten. Get that on there. All right, so now that nut and that washer, which we'll reuse the nut, we're not reusing the washer. Kit supplies it with that. And then we're gonna move on to the back and take that one off. This is our rear cab mount, right where the cab ends and the bed starts. This one, they were actually nice enough. They put a capture up top with 2 little tangs on the top of the bolt. So when you go to take this nut off, the stud will actually stay put, but not going forward. Going forward, it's gonna wanna spin on you, but they were nice enough to at least do this for us. So we take that off. Next step is going to be to remove these bolts via the access holes that we got from the top. Well, they're a little, I wouldn't say stuck, but they're a little, seated where they are. So the trick here is put a 9 millimeter socket on there, and then you could either tap this with a hammer until it releases, or in my case, I have a air hammer, so that's what I'm going to do. Not as easy. See, we just took our rear one loose with the air hammer. Fortunately, the front one on both sides was already loose, so that one will be able to just pull out. The rear one was the only one that gave me any issues on sliding out the top. So now we're going to remove those bolts from the access holes in the cab. We took the nuts loose on the front and the rear cab mount. We removed the bolts through that top access ports in the cab, and now what we got to do is pick our jacking points for the cab. Fortunately enough for me, I'm able to use a lift, and I have these stands that I will be using as my lifting points. You can use a floor jack with blocks of wood, anything of that nature. Here, my sliders actually almost not letting me use these, but luckily they slid over. So I did the rear pinch weld right here. It seemed like a nice strong point to lift from. So I put one jack stand there. And then I put another one right here. So those will be my 2 jacking points. Basically, instead of screwing those up, what I'm gonna do is let the lift down, and as I let the lift down, the cab's gonna stay where it is, and the rest of the truck and the frame is gonna lower, which will open up this gap and allow me to get access to the bolts that hold in the mount, and also give me enough room to remove the mount so I can put in the new ones. So that's what we're gonna do next. All right, as you just saw, I just let the truck down some, which opened up the gap here. Also very important that you trust whatever you're holding your cab up with, because you're gonna be working in right here with your fingers, and you're gonna lose a finger if the cab falls off whatever it's jacked up on, and it's gonna wanna sit right back where it was. So next we're gonna remove these 2 14mm bolts. There's one right here, and then there's one on this back side on both mounts. We're gonna remove those next. All right, once you get your bolts out and you get your gap big enough in between the frame and the body, you can just lift your old mounts out of there. The old mount, you can see it's real badly tore up. That's the new mount. It's gonna be a lot better. The other side, the other rear side looked the same. The front on the driver's side was actually still in pretty good shape. Got our other front. That slides out. I actually had the unfortunate luck that the bolt on this side of the cab mount right there, the head broke right off of it. So I'm gonna have to either drill it out or use the plasma cutter or something, but it's not too big of a deal. While I have all the space, I can get it done relatively easy, and luckily I have all the tools to do it here. So that being said, when you go to take your bolts out, lots of penetrating oil, lots of WD-40, use some heat on the nuts. That one was just too rusty. There was no way that one was coming out okay. So definitely be super careful so you don't have to end up drilling any bolts when you go to do this to yours. Alright guys, little update. That is where the broken bolt was. What I ended up doing was actually, I almost took the plasma cutter and cut it out, but I took a nut and I welded another nut to the top of the stud, and of course welding that got it red, super red hot. Heated it up with a torch even further, and then put a wrench on it, and it backed right out. So got super lucky on that one. Pretty thankful that came out. I just got to find a new bolt for it, but we got plenty here in the shop, so that ended up working out great. Moving on to installing our new mounts here. And we're just going to go in just like this. Here, actually, let me put the washer in a second. Slips on there, slides down into place, and it's still a little warm. Put that there. Don't forget your washer on top. We'll go ahead and pick this one up. Do the same to the rear. Alright. That. Slide that right in there. Put our washer up. And next we'll get all 4 of those bolts started. We're going to be tightening all of our body mounts up. They're all installed. Those top nuts are tight. So next we're going to tighten all these up, and then we're going to torque them to spec. Spec on these is 34 foot-pounds. It's 34 foot-pounds for all 6 mounts all the way around. All right, that's it. We got all the mounts in. Let's go around and show you what they look like. Those are all in. They're going to be slightly stiffer than OEM, so you can expect a little more vibrations, but your cab's also not going to be bouncing around and everything on trails like it would with the OEM ones, and these will last a whole lot longer than the OEM ones were going to last. So guys, that's it for today's video. Did our install of the energy suspension cab mount bushings and the front radiator support. If you like this video, like, subscribe. I'm going to try to do more informative videos. The past few, I've just been going on a lot of cool trips, so I just kind of thought I'd throw that in the mix too. Do a little bit of videos of that stuff as well. But I hope to bring you guys some more informative stuff like this, and I hope this can give people the confidence to do it at home, and you know, the garage is totally doable there. A lot easier here at a shop, but just fortunate enough to have the tools in place to do this. So thanks for watching, if you watched all the way up to this point, and hope to see you guys in the future.